Okay, troops, we got work to do tonight, and it's fun work. It's fun work. But let's pray and ask God to help us in that work. Father in heaven, we thank you for your word. We believe that your book, our book, the Bible, is unlike any other book, and it speaks, it reveals who you are, it encourages us, it instructs us. It's good for so many things in our lives. So we pray that you would help us open it up to us tonight as we talk, that we might deepen our relationships and deepen our relationship with you as well. So we thank you for this time and give it over to you now in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, we've been for the last 2 weeks in the Valley of Decision. We've been talking about decision making. 2 weeks ago, it was the decision that was made by Naomi and Elimelech and their family to go to Moab from Israel. We talked about that. It was only one verse in chapter 1. And then there was the decision 10 years later to leave Moab to go to Israel because the famine was over. And last week we talked about what went into that decision. But there was a decision within that decision, because of course Naomi was wise enough to know that the decision to go with her daughters-in-law was not her decision. It was their decision. They were adult women, and she kind of, at least the way I see it, she kind of forced them to think about that decision, to work through it, whether or not it was a good decision or a bad decision to follow her into Israel, which they both started to do. And then, let me see, last week, I think we ended, let me just pull up the scripture on my little phone here. I think we ended where Ruth had made the decision and Orpah had made the decision to stay in Moab. Ruth had made the decision to go. And that was verse 14, I believe. And we left them weeping, right? We left them all teared up because it was an emotional decision, the way many really important decisions in life are. I want to say this, though, before we get into the verses tonight. And that is that for me, maybe you agree, you tell me if you agree or you disagree. But for me, the hardest thing about major decisions is indecision. The hardest thing about making important decisions is being between two decisions, not having made a decision. And that is where we've been all last week. That's where Ruth and her daughters-in-law were. I think once you've made a decision, now we should make them carefully and prayerfully, but once you've made a decision, it's so much easier to move on. Anybody agree with me on that?
Mm-hmm.
I think you're right, but I don't think it was a hard decision for Ruth. I really don't.
For Ruth, yeah, right. Maybe
I don't
not.
think it was hard for her to make that decision at all.
I would agree with you.
Maybe it was because maybe it was wrong, or not hard, not easy, but it was a major decision. But I don't think it was a hard one for her.
Well, and maybe not for Naomi either, except she really paused to help them, as I said, to work through the decision, to make a careful decision about their future. And it might have been the hardest decision for Orpah, who felt like, I think she was driven, as somebody said last week, she was driven more by emotion. She thought she wanted, I think one of you said, I think it was you, Mary, that said that she was more, her relationship with Naomi was the thing that was driving her decision, not so much her decision about following the God of Naomi, Naomi's God. But she was close to Naomi, and it was hard for her to decide not to go. But anyway, it all ended up in tears. And so we come to beginning at verse 15, or let me just read verse 14, because the end of it kind of leaves us right on a cliff. They lifted up their voices and wept again. And Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. So there is Ruth clinging. That's where we left it last week. And I would like someone to read verses 15 through 18, which are the verses we're going to talk about tonight. Verses
Okay,
15 through 18.
I'll read it, Rick.
Okay, Mary.
Look, said Naomi, your sister-in-law is going back to her people and her gods. Go back with her. But Ruth replied, don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, even if even death separate you and me. When Naomi realized that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped urging her.
Yeah, but boy, those are some of the most
Very
beautiful
hard for me to
verses.
read.
What's that?
That was hard to read because I know whither thou goest, I will go, where thou lodgest, I will lodge. I had to pay attention. To
Oh,
what I was
yeah. Yeah, the King James version. Yeah, yeah. Those are some of the most beautiful, I think, some of the most beautiful verses in the Old Testament, in the Bible. But in these three verses, the story, if it were on a stage, if this were a story being told on the stage, Ruth is the one who takes center stage for the first time. Up to now, she's been the daughter-in-law of Naomi, and Naomi's kind of been the main figure. But now Ruth takes center stage. And I don't know whether you have the same concern that I do, but I thought last week that Naomi understood that the women had made a decision. Orpah tearfully left. Ruth clung to her, and yet Naomi is continuing now. Let me ask the question that I gave you, and then we can talk about it. This is on verse 15. Even after Ruth chose to go with Naomi and not return to Moab, Naomi tries to change her mind. I thought she was past this. She did a good job helping them to work through the decision. And Ruth made the decision, Orpah made the decision, and now Naomi in verse 15 continues down that road. See, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people. Return after your sister. She's still trying to get rid of Ruth. Now, I need your help to figure out why she continues to do this.
To make sure Ruth has no doubts at all, because if you had any doubts and someone kept badgering you, you would probably leave.
And
You
what if
probably-
after they got
You would
back?
probably leave.
you know,
So you're
You
saying
would go home.
you're saying the badgering is designed to
Make sure there are no doubts,
okay, all right.
and
that
once
they're
she got-
firm in their decision.
Yep.
Yeah, and once she got to where she was going, I think maybe Naomi was afraid that she then would regret her decision.
I think Naomi was worried about her future, Ruth's future.
Ruth's future.
Hmm.
He is further along in the book.
So if she's worried about Ruth's future, then what Karen said factors in there too. She
Right.
wants Ruth to be very, very sure. Tom, how about you? Do you agree?
If there's just one person, the decision making is easy. With two people gets a little complicated, but then when this other affects it, it can be complicated.
Yeah. Well, there were three in this decision making. And now Orpah's left, and now there are two. There are still two. And I'm going to be, I guess, the only one to suggest. I think you might be giving Naomi a little too much credit. Here's the way I see it, and feel free to disagree with me on this. I think Naomi clearly does not want the responsibility of Ruth with her. She's a bitter woman. She sees herself as being under the punishment of God. And I think she doubts her own ability to care for someone other than herself. I can't explain otherwise why she continues to push her away. But go ahead, have at it.
We
You're
did.
probably right.
Oh, come on, don't give in that
Uh,
easy.
Maybe it's a little of both, Greg.
Yeah,
mm.
yeah, maybe that's true. Maybe that's usually where it ends up, right? It's not.
Well, as a young woman, I would prefer to be independent than to go home to my parents. That's how I feel. Just, I would rather go live any life of independence than have to go back and live under my parents' roof. That was my thinking when I read it.
Mm-hmm.
Was Naomi afraid that Ruth would not be accepted where she was Moabitish?
Yeah, we'll kind of
Oh,
get it.
British. Okay.
Let's let Nancy and Dave in again. For some reason, they dropped us. They just left the group.
Oh,
Here they are. You're back.
They're on mute.
Are you? There they are. We're back. You're back, and we're glad you are.
What happened anyway?
Where'd
I
you
have no
go?
idea. You just disappeared.
Not, well, okay, I lost internet then because you froze
Oh,
and didn't come back. So I thought, well, something happened with his connection.
it could have been. Could have been.
Well, I did think it was the internet.
Yeah, we've been talking about. I'll give you a chance to weigh in before we move on. We've been talking about why after Orpah left Naomi, and after Naomi had tried to convince them to leave and go back to Moab, Ruth clings to her, and she's made her decision. And in verse 15, Naomi continues to urge her to go away, to go back to Moab, to follow her sister. And I wonder if you have a thought, either of you, on why Naomi would do that.
The only thing I had thought of was that in verse 13, it says that it is more bitter for me than for you because the Lord's hand has turned against me. So she was thinking the Lord turned against her. Maybe she didn't deserve the love that she would receive from Ruth.
So we've got several kind of different answers, and I think probably you're right, Mom. I think probably it's a little of all of those. I suggested that Naomi really didn't want Ruth to come with her, didn't want the responsibility. She was a bitter woman. She was broken, and she just wanted to leave and didn't want the responsibility of Ruth. Maybe not in a bad way.
I still think some of it goes back to 6 when Naomi heard the Moab that the Lord had come to the aid of the people providing food for them. And so I think there was an attraction for all of them. Not the only attraction, but part of it.
Yeah. So whatever the case, I think we're finally past this because Naomi tries one more time, and Ruth, just like you said, Mary, Ruth, it's apparent that Ruth never had any doubts about this. And she takes the stage, center stage here, verses 16 through 18. And she just gives a beautiful, beautiful speech to Naomi. And that's where I'd like to spend most of our time, the rest of our time tonight. And this gets to the second question. I'll read it, and then we can talk about it one by one. In verse 16, and Mary, I wonder if, since you read it, could you read verse 16 one more time?
But Ruth replied, don't urge me to leave you or return back from you. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. And then 17,
Yeah.
where you die, I will die. and where
Okay.
I will be buried."
Let's zero in on 16, verse 16, because Ruth makes 4 commitments to Naomi. And if it's true that Naomi doubted Ruth in any way or doubted herself, Ruth wants to clear the deck. She makes 4 commitments. One is to follow her. Where you go, I will go. One is to live with her. And one is to share her relationships. Your people will be my people. And the fourth is to share her faith. Your God will be my God. 4 commitments. And my question for you is, and we'll go through them one by one, beginning with the first, the commitment to follow Naomi. Why might Ruth find each of these commitments to be hard, challenging to keep? And the first one is, where you go, I will go. Let's start with that one. Why might she find that to be hard to keep?
They
Well,
really don't know where they're going.
for one
Exactly.
thing, she's got to earn a living.
They don't know where they're going, other
Yep.
than to Israel. And what did
Right.
you say, Mary?
She's got to earn a living doing something.
Yep.
Has she had to earn a living in Moab when she had a husband, or is this a new thing for her?
Yeah, we
Making a
don't
living?
really know the answer to that,
No, we don't.
but they surely didn't know exactly where they were going
Israel's
Or
a
how
big
they were gonna
place,
get there.
or how they were going to get there.
but
Yeah,
they were
but-
going back, evidently, they were going back to where Naomi left when she left with Elimelech, because they knew her when
Yeah.
she got back there.
They would go to someplace familiar.
Yeah.
Why would the going be challenging for Ruth especially? Challenging enough for Naomi, but why especially challenging for Ruth? Why would it be hard?
It's unknown, and she's different. She's a Moab woman, and she worshipped other gods, and she's different. She's foreign.
Yeah, and that you mentioned, because she's a Moab woman, she might be fearful of how people would receive her anyway,
Mm,
Yeah,
along
Right.
the way and when she got there.
a lot of unknowns, a lot of fears,
But she
potentially.
never wavered.
No,
Ruth never wavered from when she first declared, and treat me not to leave thee, sorry, or to return from following after thee. She never retreated from that.
I think it was tough to start off with because she's a woman. I think, at least back in those days, the men seem to be the controlling part of the families and all that. So here's this woman. Certainly, we've done better than that these days. But I think back in then, I think women were much treated.
The only thing women were for back then was to keep the men happy.
have babies and raise them. And yeah, it was a very patriarchal society. So a lot of reasons why it would have been hard for Ruth to go with Naomi, to follow her. And I would add one more, and that is that if history was any indication of any indicator of Ruth's ability to go somewhere successfully, then the 10-year history might have caused Ruth to be a little bit doubtful about her future, about going with her, because she had gone. Now, it might have been Elimelech's doing, his decision, but she had gone, she had left Israel to go to Moab, lost her whole family, including Ruth's husband, Naomi's son. So, you know, she didn't have a great track record of going. So to follow her into what might be another unfortunate future might have been hard. So a lot of reasons why. And yet, Ruth says, where you go, I will go. No conditions, nothing. How about the second commitment she makes? She said, let me see, how exactly does it read?
Where you live.
Where you live, where you lodge, my translation says, where you live, I will live. We've all had to make adjustments over the years. When we got married, to live with another person, or Karen, to your mom, you mom having to live with us, kind of.
Vice versa.
What's that?
Vice versa.
Vice versa.
With us.
So again, the question is, why might it have been hard? See, I'm trying to understand Ruth's amazing character in making hard decisions and making them as commitments without leaving any door open, no plan B, no alternatives. I will go where you go. I will lodge. I will live with wherever you live. Why might that one have been hard?
They don't know where they're going to live right now.
Yep. There's a question of where, with whom, how hard will it be? Like Mary said earlier, I mean, where's the income coming from? Any other thoughts on?
Well, I don't think men are able to understand why a woman thinks the way she does.
Well, men are from
Mars.
Mars. Women are from Venus.
They're from
So
somewhere.
help Tom and I understand. Help Tom and I and Dave
No, but
understand,
you
Mary.
said you were trying to figure it out.
Yes.
I don't
want
think I don't think you can.
Well, that's why I think anything to go anywhere other than back to what she came from might have been a better decision. We don't know. I mean, you don't know.
It turned out to be the right decision.
Yes,
in the end.
yes. But maybe Naomi was a really good example to watch over the 10 years. There had to be something about her for Ruth to go with her. She had to have had some kind of faith. She had to believe in her God. She had to show something. I mean, that Ruth would go with her.
I agree with Karen that she saw Ruth.
Yeah,
saw
Naomi.
Naomi believing in our God, and it seemed to resonate with her more than disbelief in pagan, whatever the Moabites believed in.
Yeah, Karen, I think you make a really good point that she had 10 years. Now, no doubt,
Right.
again, there's a lot we don't know, but
Mhm.
no doubt in those days, generations lived together as Ruth is going to be living with Naomi. And so for 10 years, she probably, with her husband, Naomi's son, they probably lived with her. So she had a 10-year history. So maybe
Mhm.
this was one of the easier decisions for Ruth to make, commitments to say, where you live, I will live, because I've lived with you for 10 years and I've
Mhm.
seen who you are. And so maybe that was one of the easiest.
And had seen what she believed, had seen
Yeah.
Naomi living that kind of a life.
Right.
And seeing the way Naomi had reacted with her husband and sons in that time too.
Mhm.
She had dealt with it.
Yep. How about the third one? Now we get to something that might be harder. Your people will be my people. She made a commitment to share Naomi's relationships. Why might that have been hard?
She was willing to accept, but were they?
Big
they-
unknown.
Were they going to look at this Moabitish woman? I don't know how they dressed or how they were different. I have no idea. But were they going to look at her and say, what the devil happened to Naomi? Why did she bring that Moabite with her?
What's that expression? You can choose your family. No, you can't choose your family.
You choose
You
your
choose
friends.
your friend.
And choose your friends.
You can choose your friends. You can't choose your family. You're born into it. You have no choice, but you should be able to choose your friends. Ruth is basically saying she's going to give up that choice. Now, once she gets settled, she'll probably have the freedom to choose, but she's basically saying your people, your friends, and your family are going to be mine. That to me is
She
amazing.
was going to accept.
Yeah.
She was going to accept them.
But would they
But-
her?
Yeah,
But
exactly.
Were they going to accept her? And I think that was one of the things that Naomi was worried about. Although she never said. She never gave any hint.
Yeah,
Did they speak the same language?
no,
Oh, that too.
that's a good question. And the answer is no, they didn't. So, I mean, you've got the language barrier, you've got the culture barrier, you've got obviously the religious barrier and the racial barrier. They're a different race. So there's a lot. You lay all four of those aside. I would think that would be hard for almost anybody.
So why would they even have married Naomi's sons? This thought just pops into my head. If they
It's a good
had,
one. Good question.
that's
Again,
how I am.
Again, there's
If you
so much
can't
we.
talk to them and you don't know their language or anything, you know, they must have been really good looking or something. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a really good. I don't have an answer for that.
You stumped him,
I-
Karen. Good for you.
Huh?
You stumped him. That doesn't happen very often.
I have a lot of imagination. I'm really thinking about this.
I think it goes back again to those days that a family that didn't have a man for a leader. Not that I'm saying it's right or wrong, but I think you were thought of differently if you were, by yourself or more woman and a couple of kids. I think having a man gave the family more credibility or something. Not that I agree with.
Yeah, no, but that's a good point, Tom. We don't know, but it could be that these women, Orpah and Ruth, came from. We only hear about their mother, because Naomi says,
Mhm.
"Go back to your mother." Maybe they were looking for male leadership, but you would have thought they could find it in Moab from Moabites.
Yeah, but I don't think the Moabite men were as good to their women as the
Israelites.
Israelites were. I think
They
the
must
mo-
have picked up, living with the men for 10 years, they must have picked up the language and the
Right.
customs and that type of thing.
But I don't think those Moabite men really cared whether the women were happy or not, as long as they kept them happy.
They weren't Moabite men.
Huh?
No, she means
The other men.
in
The other
general.
men.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
Well, in the same way as we've been saying that Ruth and Orpah must have seen the best in Ruth, must have seen God in Ruth.
in Naomi.
I'm sorry, in Naomi. It could be that they saw the same thing in the faith of her sons. Maybe they saw God in their sons, even though we don't know what their relationship was with God. But maybe it was their faith that attracted the women. But hey, we're just guessing here. That's a good question, Karen.
Yeah.
So we all agree that it would be a hard thing to just accept and share someone else's relationships, given where she's coming from. Excuse me. All right, finally, the fourth commitment she makes: your God will be my God.
that might not be a hard one
Mm.
Why do you say that?
because obviously she follows Naomi. She has noticed this.
You think
Yeah.
maybe that's why she put that one last?
Mm.
She wanted Naomi to be sure of all these others. Where you go, I'll go, all these other things. And then bring it to conclusion with
Saving
your
the best.
God being my God.
Saving the best for last, or the most important
Exactly.
for last. Yeah. Good thought. Yeah. I keep muting myself because I got a really scratchy throat. Yeah, that could have been just like living with her. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Where you live, I'll live. That could have been an easy decision because she'd lived with her. So maybe this was an easy decision too, saved as the last of those commitments because it was the most important. Yeah, just beautiful.
If she was gonna live with her God and believe in Naomi's God, it was gonna take some teaching, but she was willing to do it. And I just think, like you said, it was saving the best for last.
And
They must have worshiped God in their household.
They
I would
must have.
say. They didn't worship the idols, did they? Or who knows? Who influenced who? I mean,
I don't- Yeah, and I don't know what the Moabites worshipped.
one of their
Animal
main
idols or
their main
what?
god, I think I mentioned this last week or maybe the week before, but their main god, they had several gods, but their main god was called Chemosh. And the highest duty or act of worship,
oh yeah.
Chemosh, was to offer your youngest, I don't know if it was son or daughter, but your youngest child up as a sacrifice to the god. Just horrific. But so, I mean, it was radically different from Ruth's faith. And
Not a really nice vision, is it?
no, it's not. Um,
Although there were times when they were growing up.
No, Mary, no.
You knew my kids.
I missed something here.
Yeah.
What did you say, Mary? Times?
There were times.
And she was gonna offer her kids up.
Oh, Mary,
Shemos.
I ought to mute you just for that, but I
Yeah.
won't. I won't. One other thought about this last commitment that she makes. Your God will be my God. We all agree that Ruth was willing to accept all of Naomi's friends and family, but she had no idea how she would be accepted. One thing I think Ruth knew about Naomi's God is that she would be accepted. That the God of Israel would accept her. I think she must have learned that from Naomi. There's a verse in Jeremiah. It says, you will seek me and find me when you seek for me with all your heart. That comes 2 verses after our theme verse for this year, where Jeremiah says, I know the plans I have for you, to provide a future and a hope, for well-being, not for evil. And then he goes on to say, you will seek me and find me when you search for me with all your heart. So I think Ruth had that confidence that she might be facing some racism if she goes into Israel, but the God of Israel, and that's why she was going, really, the God of Israel would accept her. And that, of course, is still true, regardless of race, color, creed, or you just have to be a sinner to be accepted, and we're all sinners. So God receives us. Let's just go to verse 17. Mary, you want to help us on verse 17?
Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separate you and me.
Yeah, so actually there are 5 commitments. I said there were 4. Here's the 5th in verse 17. Where you die, I will die. The question is, how does verse 17 solidify Ruth's commitment to Naomi? And what does it say about their future together?
Her commitment is that she would not leave her under any circumstances.
Yeah.
She's going to be there until the very end, until both of their ends.
Till death.
Well, until death separated them.
Some of us said those words and made that commitment when we got married, or words to that effect. For better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, till death do us part. She wasn't leaving any door open. There was no prenuptial agreement, so to speak. She wasn't, no conditions, no plan B, just, I'm going to die with you.
It's like she made a covenant relationship.
Yeah. Well, a covenant, it's interesting you should use that word, Nancy. I didn't think of that, but you notice at the end of verse 17, she actually takes an oath. It's in the form of an oath. Let me get it up here. Where you, may the Lord do so to me and much more. That's the words of an oath. That's the words of a covenant, where Ruth is basically, first, she's saying all of this to to Naomi. But this she says to God at the end. She said, may you do to me more, this and more. In other words, she's basically inviting God to judge her, to punish her if she doesn't follow through on this. So it really is a covenant. It's a very solemn agreement. Not just words, more than just words.
I'm glad we're having this discussion, because when I was reading that earlier, I was like thinking, if she's saying that, not realizing that it is kind of a covenant thing, I didn't include that in it, that if she thought that God would punish her, she didn't know him very well, because for committing herself to Naomi, but he just wouldn't do that.
Yeah. Yep. Now, if you're Naomi, and we've talked about and maybe disagreed a little bit about why Naomi kept trying to convince her to go back. But if you're Naomi and you hear what Ruth has just said, 5 commitments until death, how does that change the way you feel about Ruth going with you?
It would make me realize that no matter what I said, and it did with Ruth, no matter what she said, nothing was going to change. Ruth was not going to change no matter what Naomi said to her.
Mhm.
She was committed. She was constant in the way she kept telling her these things. I don't know how many times she repeated them, but it was kind of a constant mantra. Where
Yeah.
you go, I'll go. Where you die, I'll die. Your God,
Yeah.
my God. That was not in order, but that's
Mhm.
beside the point.
Mhm.
And she realized that no matter what she said to Naomi, realized that no matter what she said to Ruth, Ruth was going to be constant in what she had said to her.
And if we're right, and Naomi's hesitation of Ruth following her, if it was a combination of Ruth herself feeling inadequate, feeling bitter, a combination of that plus wanting Ruth to think this through, then those commitments, I think, must have put Naomi at perfect peace.
She would have had to.
It did.
There
Yeah.
was no more doubt, no more reason to insist that she go back.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that makes it difficult for all of us when we're trying to go forward with our future is being haunted by our past, something in the past, whether it's past sin, past failure, a lack of trust in somebody who had failed us. And I think Naomi realizes that there's no risk to having Ruth come with her. She's not going to, keep questioning the past and Naomi's decisions to come to Moab and the family being lost. They're going to be able together, Ruth and Naomi, to look to the future and go forward and not look to the past. And that can be hard. It can be hard for all of us to do. But I think Ruth just made it a little bit easier for Naomi to just look forward, regardless of come what may. Because we're following your God. And I'm going to be here until we die. So I think those are really beautiful, beautiful words. Now we come to verse 18, which is the last verse for tonight. And when Naomi saw, we've just been talking about this, how would this have changed Naomi's mind? When Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more. I love that. Finally, and I might be totally wrong about,
It wasn't
well,
giving up.
what's that?
She wasn't giving up.
No, but I might be totally wrong in why she wasn't giving up. I'm a little bit more blaming Naomi for lacking faith and being broken and bitter and not wanting Ruth to come with her. So I might be wrong in that, but
I think you're focusing too much on that.
yeah,
Rather
Well,
than-
Naomi said she was bitter.
yeah,
I know she admitted to the bitterness, but I think Greg's focusing on it too much. Rather than accepting the love and the constancy that Ruth is portraying in the way she reacts,
Yep.
going back to Israel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Well, there's plenty of good in Naomi, and Ruth saw it, and she was willing to stake her life and her future and her everything on it, on what she'd seen in Naomi. And so now finally we can move on in this story, and Ruth and Naomi are going to move on. And, you know, when we come to that point, as Ruth and Naomi did, to make a decision prayerfully, carefully, trusting the Lord and moving forward and not looking back, we can see God do amazing things. And that's what Ruth and Naomi see as they go forward in this story. Just the amazing things we've already talked about in the, you know, when we talked in our first session about the whole book, and what an amazing God, and the way he takes a bitter, broken woman and a Moabite lass and works it into his plan for not only for them, but for Israel and for us, for salvation, as she ends up in the line of David and Jesus. It's pretty amazing. And I think Ruth's commitments in these verses helped to make it possible. So, so I didn't even ask the question, but I'll ask it, and if you have an answer. How does verse 18 move the story along? What does this delay in the story teach us about moving our own lives toward God's future for us? I guess I've
Well,
already,
I've been talking that out.
what's that?
We've been talking that out.
Yeah. And I meant to actually ask the question before I went on to my rant. But yeah, so this is kind of the introduction to the story, and now it gets really, really good. It was good up to this point. We're not even through the first chapter, but we will finish it. What's coming up here? Oh, they come to Bethlehem.
She met Boaz and everything.
Yeah, Naomi meets her one of the women that knew her, and says how bitter she is. And so, but it turns around. A lot of lessons to be learned here. So I'm going to stop our recording.